Here are the 15 pieces of advice every yoga teacher needs to hear, but often isn't always given. Now, number 1 is that yoga is a physical career with a limited lifespan. And by this, I mean, if you're a yoga teacher, you kind of have to think of yourself as an athlete. Most athletes are not doing that sport in their 40s, 50s, or 60s because they're just not as physically capable. But what they do is go into doing other things. And I often see teaching yoga in this way, at least the physical side of teaching yoga. When you're doing classes, when you're doing a lot of physically demanding work, that is for your earlier years in your yoga teaching career. But once you get to your 50s, it's likely that you just don't have the energy. You probably don't have the same want to do that anymore. So this is why yoga teachers have to be smarter about the lifespan of their career. Do the physically demanding stuff in the earlier years, and then plan for the future. Build out different revenue streams that support you in your less physically capable years. This leads me to piece of advice number 2, which is to plan for the future. Now, I see a lot of yoga teachers and they're just working month to month, some even just week to week. And I used to be like that too because I hadn't learned to think ahead. I wasn't really a strategic thinker at that time. But what you really need to be doing is thinking back from, say, the age of 50. Where do I want to be and how can I get myself there? I knew in my mid-20s that teaching 18 plus classes a week was not it. I was already feeling burnt out. So what I did is I started teaching less classes. I got a part-time job so that my needs were met, and I focused on building online. And now I have multiple income streams that support me so that I don't actually do as much. I don't even do anywhere near as much physically as I used to do because I started thinking smarter. I started planning for my future. So if you are in the early stages of your yoga teaching career, work back in the same way. Think about where you want to be, think about what you want your life to look like, and start building with that in mind instead of working week to week or month to month. Now, piece of advice number 3 is to choose your heart. I know in many of my videos, I might just make it seem like there's so much work to do. And there is work to do, but you have to think about it like this. Building a business, although hard, is only equally as hard as being stuck in a situation that you have no control over. The difference is, if you have your own business, you are making your decisions, you are taking control, you are building your own freedom. If you are stuck in this cycle where you're trading your time for your money, maybe you're working for a studio, or maybe you're just running around from studio to studio, you can feel so trapped. And I've been in both of these places. They are equally as hard. You just have to choose your heart. And I choose the business every single time. There is no way I would ever go back to teaching 18 plus classes a week because I know it's just not worth it. So if you're ever thinking, is this worth it? You have to reframe it like that. Now, piece of advice number 4 is you have to be intentional, not just busy. Because there's a lot of tasks that you can find yourself doing where you feel like you're being productive because you're busy, but actually, is that the most effective use of your time? This is something that you always need to be thinking about. And again, I go back to the example of when I used to teach 18 plus classes a week. I did that so that I could meet my needs and pay my bills. But what I realized is I was so busy doing that it did not leave any space or any time or any mental capacity to focus on building things for the future. And it wasn't until I took away some of those classes, I freed up a little bit of time, that I was able to start building for the future. It wasn't until I actually asked myself that question, am I busy or am I intentional, that things started to change. So perhaps that's one thing to reflect on at the end of this video. Look at where your time's going and look at whether it's the best use of your time. Now, piece of advice number 5 is going online is not optional. If you want to build something for the future, if you want to build something so that you are not just trading your time for money, and so you are not limited by where you can be physically, you need to build something online. Unless you have a huge audience, unless you can do one training a year and make all of the money that you need to make through that training, it's going to be very difficult. And it's likely that most of the people watching this channel probably are in that position because very few teachers are in that position. And what you do have though is every resource you can ever need to educate yourself so that you can build something successful online. Like, you might feel like you're at a huge disadvantage if you don't have an audience, if you're just starting out, if you don't feel like you've got the teaching experience yet, maybe you feel like a little bit of an imposter. But what you do have is so much free education at the click of a button. There is nothing stopping you. And when I started, there really wasn't that. I've had to figure my way out. It's one of the reasons I created this channel, was to give people that resource so that it's just one place they could go to get all the answers. But going online is not optional. It's never been easier than before. The best time to start is today. Now, here is piece of advice number 6. When it comes to growing online, a big mistake I see a lot of people making is getting distracted. There's so many opinions. There's so many people sharing, what helped them get success, or, what worked for them. And it can be very easy to be swayed. You'll stick with one strategy for a few days, maybe even a week, and then, you don't see immediate results, and then you pivot and you try something else. But what happens is you don't really give anything long enough to even see whether it's effective or not, because you've already switched to the next thing and the next thing. And I think there's a term for this. It's called getting distracted by the next shiny object. And whenever I work with yoga teachers, I see everybody do this, because it's so easy to scroll on social media and somebody who's very compelling and convincing is saying something and you're like, oh, I need to try that. And then your strategy is no longer a strategy. It's just constant switching up. And there's nothing really methodical about it. If you're going to try something, you have to see it through. And when I say see it through, is you have to push it as far as possible. So if you're working on a type of video content, don't just post it a few times and say, oh, well, that didn't work for me. You need to go back and question why it didn't work. You need to take that idea apart and see how many different ways you can formulate it, how many different ways you can present that information, how many different formats, how many different ways you can explain that thing that you're trying to explain, teach it, whatever it is. That is what I mean by pushing it. And only then can you say, yep, that didn't work for me. But if you're not doing that and you're just getting distracted and switching to the next shiny idea, you're never giving anything the time it needs. And this is where piece of advice number 7 comes in. You will see this all the time on the internet, where people will say that you can do this in this amount of days, and people will sell you on that idea. Do not buy into that idea. Anything worth having, anything worth building takes time, and it takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take. It took me 4 years to build my YouTube channel. 4 years of basically making no money, posting every week, learning after every single video, after knockback after knockback. 4 years. And I never once bought into those videos that said, do this method and you'll be here in 30 days, because I knew that it was bull. And if you've ever felt like you're not on track, you're not where you need to be, it's likely because you've fallen for this type of messaging, and it's just very misleading. Any successful person I know actually did a load of work in the background before you ever saw that success. It's just that you're seeing the finished product now, that it seems like, oh, they just got there. They didn't just get there. It's not as easy as that. So don't fall for that type of messaging. Keep your head down, stay in your lane, keep working on what you're doing. Just focus on getting 1% better each video, each class, each iteration of whatever it is that you are doing. Now, piece of advice number 8 is to build community. Seriously, focus on this. Because you can't just think of a community as people. You kind of have to think of that as your potential customer base. Because people who have built trust with you, people who you've built a rapport with, people who you've got into their good graces with, those are the people who are most likely to want to join you for a workshop, for a retreat, to buy one of your programs, to do your classes frequently. So you can't just think of it as being this useless thing, why do I need a newsletter? Why am I building a community on social media? Those are your customers. It might not seem that way because they might not be a customer yet, but you never know how much time someone might take, someone might need to be nurtured for before they do convert into a customer. So you have to treat building a community seriously as an essential part of your business. Now, piece of advice number 9 is to match your strategy with your stage of business. Another thing I see many yoga teachers doing wrong is they're trying to do things that they're not quite ready for. So the stage of business that I'm at is likely very different to the stage of business that you are at. Because, we all have different experience levels, and the things that I'm doing in my business are very different to what you should be doing in your business. If you are in the early stages of your business, you need to be focusing on your social media literacy. You need to be building a community. You need to be building an email list. You need to be understanding what people want from you and how you could potentially package that into an offer. If you are in the second stage of your business where you are a little bit more established, I'll be focusing on how you can get really good at what you're doing, how you can create the best videos, the best class experiences, how you can create your first offer, the first thing that you're actually going to sell, and how you can start dipping your toes into this world of sales. If you're in stage 3, let's call it, you really need to be focusing on creating a offer library. So not just having one thing that you're selling, but having a next step for your customers to take so you can start building out this offer suite. And if you're in stage 4, I kind of see myself in stage 4 now. You're really looking at how you can be smarter with your time, how you can optimize all areas of your business so people are naturally finding your offers, then they're being guided to the next step, and maybe even thinking about what else you can do with your time, what else you can build. But do you see now how there are different stages to this, and there are different focuses at these different stages? So you need to acknowledge what stage you're in and then only focus on that until you graduate to the next stage. Piece of advice number 10 is to create what you are qualified to create. And I say this to hopefully help anyone who feels like a bit of an imposter. So if you're looking at yoga teachers who are, 10 years your senior, they've got all this experience, all this life experience, not just teaching experience, and they could basically teach anything confidently because they've got that experience. And you're like, what can I create? What can I add? I don't have that experience. Teach what you feel qualified to teach, create what you feel qualified to create. If that's, bare basics, like foundational level, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's actually a much bigger audience of people who are in the beginner bracket than any other ability level in yoga. So don't let that hold you back. There's something for everybody. But what I definitely advise against is teaching things that you are not ready to teach. You have no business teaching a handstand program if you do not have a confident handstand practice, if you do not understand what it takes to go through that process of, having absolutely no confidence all the way through to being able to move away from the wall. So that is why I recommend stick to what you know, even if that's just the basics. Piece of advice number 11 is relevance matters. I see so many people creating offers based on ideas that they think are good. But an exercise that I have every single yoga teacher that I work with do is to go through your community messages, your comments, your emails, any conversations that you are having with people, and notice what they are asking for. Notice what problems keep coming up, because your offer needs to be problem aware. It needs to be a solution to a problem that lots of people are having, because that is what people are likely to pay for. Nice ideas people don't really pay for, but it's solutions to people's problems that they pay for. Let's do a little thought experiment for a second. When was the last time you were scrolling on social media and you had a problem, and perhaps you've done a Google search in recent days, so the internet's been tracking you and it knows what you're looking for, and then you see an ad that pops up that is a solution to that problem. You might have bought, you might not have bought, but you likely gave it a moment to consider because it was a solution to your problem. But if it was just a nice idea, if it had no relevance to the problem that you're experiencing right now, you'd just be swiping on without a second's thought. So this is why you cannot lead your offer creation based on what you think is going to be a good idea. You need to back it up on whether there is actually an audience, whether there's actually, a group of customers out there who are actively looking for a solution to that problem. Piece of advice number 12 is that getting a side job is not a failure. Through building my yoga career, I've worked as a freelancer, I've gone back and worked full-time and been doing doing the business thing full time on the side as well. I've done so many things just to be able to pay the bills, just to be able to take that financial pressure off so that I could focus on the business. If that's you, if you have to do that, you are not failing. We all have to figure our own way around things just to make things work. You might be a parent and you're juggling bringing up little ones, and you can by no means compare your situation to someone who might be single, living at home without any of those same pressures. So if you have to take something on the side, it is not a failing, it is your way of making it work. Piece of advice number 13, say you do have a job on the side and you're building your business. A question I commonly get asked is, when do I take the leap? When do I go full time? My advice is, once your business revenue matches that of your salary, that would be when I would be looking to make the switch. My experience with my YouTube channel was when the YouTube channel started making the same amount of money that I was making through my salary, through my full-time job, I then started considering it. But I was a little bit risk averse, so I waited. I gave it a couple of months to make sure that this was actually still gonna continue to make money. And about 4 months later, I spoke to my dad because I was working with my family business at the time, and he just said, go for it. Don't even look back, just go. And I haven't looked back since. That was many, many years ago now. But I needed to wait those few months just to know for sure. Maybe you do the same thing, but once you get to that level where it's matching what you're currently making so that you know that, your needs are met, there's not that financial pressure, I would go and double down on everything that you're doing. Piece of advice number 14 is that when it comes to building a business, you are going to have to sacrifice your free time. There's no two ways around it. I have worked stupid hours. Sometimes I still do, because occasionally I'm a busy fool. These days I'm trying to get better. But you have to acknowledge that in order to build anything, it's probably going to take more than you think it's going to take. If you think a job's going to take you 2 hours, it's probably going to take you 4. It just does, because I think as humans, we're brilliant at underestimating how long things actually take. And it's likely if you think you're going to build something in 6 months, it might be more like a year. If you think, it's going to take you a year to get there, it might take you longer. And what you have to be prepared for is the things that you're going to have to say no to so that you can focus on your business. Like through my 20s, I have said no to so many different plans with friends, with family, important things that, not the seriously important things, but, some things that, I probably should have been there for and I wasn't there for because, I had to prioritize my business. And I've had to make my peace with that. And I do feel like any person that's building a business has to make their peace with that you can't have it all, but you just have to decide what your priority is. And for me, my 20s were all about prioritizing my business. I'm 29 now, but it now means that going into my 30s, I have this business that has set me up and will continue to set me up for the rest of my life because I just sacrificed that time in my 20s because I said, this is the time where I'm just going to get my head down. So if you're in that stage and you really want to build something, you really want to get out of the situation you're in and be in a new situation where you have more freedom, it's good to have that conversation with yourself where you just say, look, I'm just going to have to sacrifice a little bit of my free time. I'm going to have to say no to things that I might not want to say no to, but I know why I'm doing it. I know it's for a bigger purpose and, it is going to pay off. I just need to get my head down, stay in my lane and focus. This leads me to the final piece of advice. Many yoga teachers do not see themselves as business people, but they are. If you are a sole trader, if you're managing your time, if you're, creating services in exchange for money, you're a business person. Just because you're a yoga teacher and everybody thinks that we live in like la la land, we're all woo woo. We're not. We're business people too. So you have to start taking yourself seriously like a business person. Use all of these pieces of advice to think ahead, to start thinking a little bit more strategically, to think about what you can put your time into that will continue to generate you an income. Not just trading your time for money and then being stuck in that cycle, but just thinking about how you can leverage your time and be smarter with your time. And as I said, sometimes you've just got to get your head down. You've just got to be a little bit selfish for a short amount of time. Let the people around you know that that's what you're doing, and they'll likely understand that that's just what's necessary to build something of substance. I hope that you found this helpful, and I would love to know which piece of advice maybe opened your eyes the most in the comments. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.